All right.
Why not? Oh, yeah, that does catch me. Okay, cool. I'll try to move around here. It should be good. Turn this a little bit this way, maybe. The trains will stop soon, so we don't have to fight with that. So welcome to Teltech. Thanks for coming out for this meetup. Also, thanks to Sean for organizing this. I decided to do this kind of last minute, so as you'll find out in a second, I actually live in Seattle. I'm out for a week. I tend to come out like once a month for about a week. And this presentation is actually based on an article I wrote on LinkedIn probably about 6 or 7 months ago. The genesis of which was I was hiring for a client developer position. I looked at probably 50 resumes and 45 of them were just so bad I wanted to punch a wall. And so rather than get angry, I decided I want to do something constructive. I want to put together a post on how you actually get in the door at a place. Like, what are the do's, what are the don'ts, how do you approach getting a job, particularly in tech. And, you know, this obviously has a Teltech bent. You know, we have our own culture, we have our own way of doing things, and you know, which we quite like, but, you know, your mileage may vary a bit. Not every place hires the same as we do. But, you know, most of the things that you will see here are applicable, you know, to most tech sort of positions. So I'll talk for a while, probably about 45 minutes. The agenda looks something like this. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself, and then I'll step through kind of what the process of hiring looks like in most places, right? How do you find a job? How do you apply for a job? Some resume tips, interviewing, and then ultimately, you know, getting the offer. And again, you know, we have like an hour or so. This is not going to be super comprehensive. There are lots of great resources about all of these things in much more depth on the web and LinkedIn and bloggers and all sorts of stuff. It's more designed just to kind of give you, you know, high level but impactful ideas. So, first question is, who am I? I told you a little bit about myself. I grew up here in New Jersey, actually. I left about, I don't know, 15 years or so ago to move to Silicon Valley, where I worked for 10 years in some tech companies, one of which got bought by Microsoft, and so I moved to Seattle, and that's where I've been for about the past 5 years at this point in time. I've been employee one at a company. I have been through acquisitions with both big companies and small companies. I've been, you know, in Fortune 100 companies like Microsoft and Nokia, so I've seen and done a lot of all this stuff. More concretely, a little bit about me personally, which is part of the Teltech thing. We don't just want to know what you do behind a computer. We like to know about you as a person. We're very big on family. We're very big on, you can see this table we have here. You know, this is where we have lunch together every Thursday and a lot of other days kind of ad hoc. And we really like to, you know, do things together and kind of understand each other on a level that transcends just putting out a product every day. So I live on a farm. It's a picture of one of our horses that lives on the farm. This is my family. I have a wife and 2 kids. We're all very wonderful, and I miss terribly. I am a huge soccer fan. And because I live in Seattle, I support the Seattle Sounders, who have been in the championship the past 2 years, though this year they lost, the previous year they won. I also like to fly drones as kind of a hobby. So that's a little bit about kind of what I do. So more importantly, what do I know about hiring? I've been doing this for about 20 years. You know, when I started, I think I started in tech, specifically in 1997, as the technical director of a small Silicon Valley firm, where I was basically employee one, and I basically built out all the technical personnel in the office. In my career, I've hired probably about 50 people, only one of whom has ever had to be fired. So I like to think my process is pretty good for separating the wheat from the chaff. I have done new teams, and I have rebuilt old teams. So kind of a little bit of both of those. And I have looked at so many resumes. This stack here probably doesn't even do it justice. Certainly hundreds, probably closer to thousands, which again is applicable here. The most important thing, though, when it comes to hiring for me is that I really care about hiring, right? I'm a process guy. I love this kind of stuff. I love meeting people. I love learning about people. I like bringing great people into our company and watching them grow and watching them thrive. And this is super important to me. There are not a lot of people that really dig HR and dig hiring. Most managers actually hate it. They see it as a chore, it's a nuisance, you have to read through all the stuff and so on. And to some degree, that's true. But the idea here is to kind of make my life sort of easier by making your lives easier too. So, finding a job. You want a job. That's a great idea, certainly. Then the question is, how do I find a job? And after I've found a job that I would like to get, how do I actually get it? You've come to the right place. So one of the first places, of course, you'll start are job sites. And job sites are great. You should go to job sites. They're wonderful. There are loads of them out there. I'm not going to talk about job sites. You know about LinkedIn. You know about Stack Overflow jobs. You know about Indeed. You probably know about a million of these types of things. I'm not going to get into that. They've all have their pros and cons, but that's, that sort of table stakes at this point in time. I will talk a bit about recruiters though. And specifically, I'm talking about agency recruiters. So people that do this for a living, not, a internal recruiter at a company. They have a very different gig. It's more of a specialized HR kind of thing. I'm talking about, people that are kind of hired guns, for so good things about recruiters. Their Rolodex in a lot of ways is your Rolodex. And yeah, nobody uses Rolodexes anymore, but you get the point. The idea is that they have places they can put you. They have other people they talk to. They have people they know. And your chances of getting placed are somewhat greater because of that. Also, they are invested in your success. Generally, they don't get paid unless you get placed. So it's in their best interest to put you somewhere where you'll stay for at least 90 days so that they get paid, which leads to a better use of your time, generally speaking, right? You don't spend as much time going through the details. You have somebody kind of setting up meetings for you and making those initial calls and all that sort of stuff. And for you as a candidate, that means you have less interviews, and the interviews that you do have tend to be more impactful, high quality. Recruiters are also good when you are in a specialized kind of market. So an app developer with telephony experience, like here, or when there's scarcity of labor, which in technology is also sort of true, right? So recruiters for tech in general right now are kind of not a bad idea. Also particularly beneficial when you're coming from a bigger company or a well-known company. Someplace that has brand recognition so people go, oh yeah. When I used to work at Nokia, we had a saying, a lot of sayings, but one of them was, you will never not get an initial interview with Nokia on your resume. And the same is true now with Microsoft and Google and so on. So bad parts about recruiters, it really is trusting. You have to trust that these people are working for you and working for you a lot. And that's not always true. In a lot of cases, they will tend to undersell you. They're looking for the easiest place that they can spot you in, which may not be the place that you want to grow to, which is important. That can potentially lead to poor placement, being put someplace that you're not really going to thrive and ultimately is going to be bad for you. Yeah, maybe last 90 days and they get paid, but in 6 months you're like, why am I here? Also, typically not great for entry-level positions or for career pivots. So you currently work in you have an engineering degree processing natural gas or something, and you decide, I'd like to be a database administrator, so you take some classes and you get some skills there. Recruiters aren't really going to help you out there in a lot of cases. What will always help you out is your network, for sure. Like I said, I've been doing this a little over 20 years. Even thinking back to, so as an exercise for this presentation, I thought back to my first job I had even in high school. And in all the jobs I've had since high school, I've gotten precisely one from responding to some sort of a cold ad. Every other one that I've been involved with has been one that somebody hooked me up with in some way, shape, or form. It might have just been, hey, talk to my friend, he's hiring for something, right? But the point is, having that connection is ultimately what started me on my path to getting in the door. So very important. You also want to be targeted in what you're looking for, right? You don't want to be blowing shotgun holes in everything. You want to be a sniper. You want to be looking for jobs that ultimately you really want at places that you really want to be. And this is important because if you put the amount of effort into this process that you will need to put into it to get in the door, you're not going to have time to do that. You're going to have to be very focused, and you're going to have to be very methodical, and you're going to have to find a target. You're going to have to assess the wind. You're going to have to lay there with green crap all over your head for a couple of days maybe to get the shot that gets you in the door. That's just how it is these days because it is such a crowded market and because people are becoming fussier and fussier as there's more talent folding in. Also, I hate these positions. You see these advertised all the time. Here's a good piece of advice. Don't ever apply for one of these ninja rock star, code monkey hacker, unicorn positions. And there's a great post on this, which is where I stole the title. But you take one of these jobs and I guarantee you will experience suffering. And here's why. These jobs are created in companies that have no direction. Typically, they get titles like this because 5 different people have put the job description together, right? HR threw some stuff in, and then the CTO threw some stuff in, and then the engineering director threw some stuff in. And ultimately, if you even look at the job description, it doesn't even make sense. Like junior app developer, entry-level position with 7 years of experience on iOS, Android, and Windows Phone. What? And you can generally sort of tell by reading these job descriptions that you're just in for a world of hurt. So really, these types of positions, you see a title like this, turn the other way, run, don't come back. Not worth your time. So let's talk a bit about applying for the job. Every deck I do has an M&M slide in it. Here's the M&M slide. But this is true, right? If you're applying for a job, how badly do you want it? Because that's important to me as a hiring manager. That's important to Sean as a hiring manager. You get one chance, and if you screw it up, you're not going to get another chance, at least not here. And I can tell you myriad ways through the process that people have screwed this up. I probably will as we go through this. Rule 1, maybe even the golden rule, is don't be lazy. Like, don't be lazy. If you want to work for us, if you want to work for anybody, you should be prepared to put the effort into it, right? You are competing with maybe 50, 60 other people who want the same position that you do. And of those 50 or 60 people, probably 10% of them, 5 or 6, are as good as you are, maybe even better. So the question is, how do you differentiate yourself? How do you do a better job? Step 1, first to do, write a custom cover letter. Don't send me a cover letter you've sent to other 10 people because I will never get past the cover letter. I'll delete it and you're done. I mean, seriously. If you want to work here, I want to know about you. I want to know why you think this is a good place to work, right? Because again, there are other people that want this job too. Why do you want to work here? Why do you want to work at Teltec or whoever it is that you're applying to, right? You should have a very compelling story. And what that is can vary, right? It could be because you're a Go programmer and they're like the most well-known Go shop on the East Coast, and you would love to go contribute to that environment. It could be because you like telecom apps and you have been a lifelong user of TrackFollow. You really want to have impact on building that product and helping it touch other users. Whatever it is, but have a reason for doing that. If it's just my current job kind of sucks, my boss is a jerk, and I kind of need to get paid, so I'll throw some resumes out there. Like, don't even bother. Don't send it to us because we'll never look at it. Number 2, which is related to number 1, learn to write well, right? I live in Seattle. I know a lot of people that work for Amazon. Being able to clearly communicate anything is a huge asset, right? In tech in general, there's more and more focus every day on documentation. I have both a product management and a technology background. I've done a lot of writing. I was an English minor in college. I'm really, really kind of a stickler when it comes to being able to write and being able to communicate. Because, like Jeff here says, and he's like the richest man on the planet, so he probably is doing something right. It makes you think, it makes you structure, it makes you put things together in a way that you can explain them well to other people. And, you may need to make a couple of drafts. You probably want to have some other people look at it, make sure it tells a good story. But, there is, and the key word in this is narratively, right? When you write, even your cover letter, it's just one page, usually 3 or 4 paragraphs. What's the story you want to tell? You know, if you're competing against 60 people, how are you going to tell me in 3 or 4 paragraphs how you landed here, what you're up to, what you want to do, and why I should hire you, right? If you can master that, like, you're going to jump to the top of my heap every single time. Detail-oriented means, yes?
You said in terms of the custom cover letter, do you think sometimes when you write a cover letter, does it make sense to try to find the person to address? Sometimes that's difficult.
That's a good question, and no. Really, I mean, 20 years ago when you kind of could figure it out, yes, but now you don't know if HR is, you know, I'll take you through our process in a little bit, but you don't know if HR is going to see it first, or the hiring manager is going to, or some other thing. Generally, it's not worth doing. I will say, if you do it, make sure you get the person's name right. Like, I can't tell you how many emails I've gotten addressed to Mike. Hey, Mike. Hey, Mark. Nope, it's Matt, and I'm going to delete your resume now. So, you know, which is a nice segue, thank you, to, you know, being detail-oriented. So, you know, the part on the right was an actual example from an actual resume I got where the person said they were detailed-oriented. No hyphen, it's not detailed-oriented, you know. So if you're going to be detail-oriented, really be detail-oriented. And really don't ever use that phrase in a resume anyway, because it's silly, right? If you're not detail-oriented by default, it's going to show really quickly. You don't need to tell me you're detail-oriented. It's like telling me you breathe, right? You know, you breathe. Okay, that's cool. There are great tools that are free that can help you go so far with regard to your cover letter and just everything, right? One of which is every product by Microsoft and Google and everybody else has a spell check, which also does grammar and a bunch of other things. Not perfect, but very helpful. We'll catch a lot of stuff that you miss. I ran it through this presentation before I presented it. And tool like Grammarly, which, you know, again, it's free. It runs on almost every operating system. It plugs into Chrome, Firefox, and other stuff, and does a great job of just helping you with spelling and style and stuff like that. And it just makes you look so much more professional, and they take like no time. Kind of related to what you just asked, don't call us, we'll call you. Again, this is not like many years ago when you end your cover letter with, I would appreciate when I can set up a mutually available time so that I might take you further through the benefits of my resume. I don't have time for that. Nobody has time for that, right? So putting that sort of stuff in there, you know, is just, I don't want to say it's silly because it's a nice thing to do, but it's just, it's not going to be productive in kind of the times we live in where you get 70 resumes, right? I can't talk to 70 people. If I do want to talk to you, if you're one of like the 5 or 6 that I ferret out, I will definitely get back to you and I will say, hey, we should have a chat to see, you know, me to tell you a bit more about Teltec, you tell me a bit more about yourself, and let's see what happens. You know, I can't tell you how many times, even just going through that first meeting, right? Like, so I have a senior Android developer position, and I get an email from someone that's been at a college for 6 months. Okay, so that's a delete. And then the next day I get an email that says, I'd appreciate it if we could set up a time so you could give me some feedback on why you didn't see me as a fit for this job. And my response is basically, are you serious? Like, if you don't already know, there is nothing I can tell you that's going to help you. And remember, I don't have time. The last thing I would add to this is, it is a good idea to apply for a job which is a stretch for you. I think that's fantastic, right? And I think Sean would agree. When you see a resume come in and you can see, that the person may not be completely qualified in everything, but that they've been on a, you know, continuum career-wise, and that it's a next step for them. That's encouraging. Those are people I actually want to talk to because it shows that they have drive, and it shows that they have a plan, and it shows that they're interested in themselves and their career, which is great. That's good. But again, like, you know, the intern who wants a senior dev position, don't do that because it's a waste of everybody's time. You're not really ready for that position. You're just throwing darts at a dartboard, and, you know, ultimately it's just not great. So let's talk about resumes. Ultimately, resumes are designed to solve a signal and noise problem. And when you're constructing your resume, you need to think about solving that in 2 dimensions. First, you are solving it against yourself. You want to make sure that you are getting as much signal for the position that you're applying for across as reducing the noise of stuff that's not necessarily relevant to that position. But this is kind of hard because, well, I'm not saying necessarily that you create a custom resume for every position, but that's kind of nuts. But I'm saying, if you're looking at 3 or 4 positions and they're roughly the same types of roles and the same types of companies, try to be thinking around that as you put your resume together versus including things that may not be relevant to the position. I'll talk a little bit about this in a second, but you don't need to include every single thing you've done at every single job, right? Put the things that are going to be most relevant to the type of position you're looking for. 3 or 4 bullets for any position is easily enough. And then the other part of this, is you want your signal to be higher than everybody else's signal. You want to drive other people's resumes down into the noise while yours stays up in the signal. So, you have to think about how do I make myself look good with respect to the things I've done? And then, of course, you're thinking about how do I make myself look good compared to everybody else who's probably applying for this position. Here's another thing, speaking of noise. These types of things. I call this alphabet soup. These types of things are not helpful because, number one, no one reads these. I would argue that, number 2, you can't read this because there's just so much there. And so please just don't do that. When I see this, I think of this. It's just, it's completely unhelpful, right? Everybody in technology has worked with a million technologies over their careers, right? Especially if you're getting into senior level of like 5 and 10 years, right? It's meaningless. Absent any context, it tells me nothing other than you worked on a bunch of technologies. And even then, I don't know what worked with means, right? You worked with HTML. Did you pull out Dreamweaver and put up a web page for your friend's sister's daycare? Or did you build an e-commerce site for JCPenney, right? Very different. Along the lines of what I was saying, you want to be clear, you want to be concise, and you want to be contextual. So here are 2 examples pulled from real resumes that I just kind of picked at random. Interestingly enough, the person on the left-hand side actually started here yesterday. So this is an example of someone who actually got hired. So if you look at the one on the left, right, build prototype apps for company, whatever, in Objective-C and Swift with an automated build, test, and deploy infrastructure using Jenkins, Fastly, and Fabric. So what they did, the technologies they've used, how they deployed it, right, very clear, concise, and easy. So I know, I've read one bullet point, I already know a lot about this person. Secondly, onboarded new dev and QE and shipped the first version capsule in 4 months. Again, that's a fairly important piece of information, right? They were working with other people. They were still keeping to a schedule. Nice. Moved the code base from Swift 2 to Swift 3 while keeping the release schedule. Again, talking about specific technologies, talking about something that they've done, relevant to us because we do iOS dev, and now we've moved from Swift 3 to 4 and so on. And then designed and documented RESTful APIs using Apiary. So again, okay, so at least can document a RESTful API, which is important. Used Apiary, which is a good tool, and now know that. And also know this person likes documentation, which warms my heart and warms Sean's heart to figure out here. So on the left-hand side, working as an iPhone developer for a blank application. Okay, so working, interesting. Here's what the application does. I don't care. I'll go look that up if I want to know, right? It doesn't matter who it was. It's irrelevant. Worked on user account settings with a capital U, which is incorrect. For local notification filtering, bids, offer setup, QR code scanning, again, both capitalized, list view, capitalized. So this person worked on some stuff in an app, but ultimately I don't know. I don't know if they used Swift. I don't know if they used Objective-C. I don't know if they used a framework like Ionic. I mean, I have no idea what they did. And then they back it all up with talking about iOS 4 and 5, which by the way needed the space put in. Why you see 3 lines. And iOS 5 was 6 years old. I don't care. I mean, again, this is not going to get you the job. It's poorly written. It's got grammatical errors, and it doesn't tell me anything about what you do. And it's not recent, right? Okay, you worked on iOS 5 7 years ago. How does that apply to anything that's going on today? What I'm looking for, and I think what we're all looking for, is stuff like on the left, demonstrable experience with context. So I know kind of what you did, what you've done. Something like another blurb I pulled from actually a friend of mine who works at a company I used to work at. Modernized legacy code base by introducing Dagger 2, RX Android, and Butterknife. Again, that's a nice, concise explanation. So he took an old code base, he updated it, he used these technologies. That's great, fantastic. That's what you should strive for. Here are some dirty little secrets about your resume that I think you should know. Let's talk about the black hole. There are a lot of jobs that are posted that companies never intend to hire for. Interesting, right? And it sounds insane. But through my experience, legally, many companies over a certain size, if they are hiring for a position, even if they plan to fill it internally, even if they know who they're going to put in the position, they have to advertise it for SOX compliance and a bunch of other things. So, when you see a position in a lot of cases for a bigger company that looks too good to be true and seems maybe even oddly specific in certain ways, that's probably because the hiring manager wrote it specifically for the person they envision in the job and plan to put in it, and sending them your resume is completely a waste because it's literally never going to be looked at. It's going to sit in a queue of 200 other resumes, and then they're going to hire that other person at the end of the 30 days because they go, well, we posted the job, we didn't find anybody as qualified, so we're going to hire Biff over there. Keep things simple, right? Like I just explained on the previous slide. Keeping things simple, to the point, easy to read, easy to understand is just hugely valuable to me as a hiring manager. And frankly, it shows that you can say, look, this is what I do and this is how I do it. Bam, you're done. It doesn't need to be. It's a resume. It doesn't need to be floral. It doesn't need to be like Melville or Tolstoy or James Joyce, whoever. It just needs to get the point across. Focus. Focus is important. Keep your resume to the things that are most important to what you do, where you want to go, and kind of what is important to you in the role that you're looking for. Again, 3 to 4 bullet points per position is absolutely more than enough. Focus on the top 2 or 3 or 4 things, and you'll be doing very well. Keep your cards close to your vest as much as possible. This folds in with keeping things simple and keeping things focused. Like many other companies these days, industries, tech suffers from biases. It suffers from privilege. It suffers from ageism and sexism and things like that, right? So, if you've been in industry for a long time and the position doesn't call for 50 years of experience, show only enough experience in your resume to show that you can do the job. Because if you go all the way back to college and you're like, I graduated college in 1960 and I worked on mainframes with punch cards, people are, and this isn't right, but this happens, people are going to go, oh man, that person's old or expensive and they're not going to talk to you, right? So it's a great idea to keep your resume as tight as you can with respect to the amount of time you've been doing whatever it is. To try and get past that. And again, it's terribly unfair, but it happens. This is advice I got from actually a resume coach I worked with a number of years ago. But I think it's great advice. Show enough experience to get the job. But if your job before something relevant was being a bank teller for 10 years, you don't need to include that anyway. But including that only shows makes it look like you're not as cool and hip and young and current. Yeah, this happens especially at companies like Facebook and Twitter, and it's true. Related to that, don't include pictures for a couple of reasons. One is, again, there's no need to show people what you look like when you're sending in a resume. It's just it's kind of not relevant. Also, in some companies, it can get your resume thrown out for the very reasons I just said, right? People will look at your resume and now they know what you look like, and depending on who gets hired and where they come from, what their age is, sex, race, gender, whatever, if they look at a picture and then hire that person over someone else, they can get sued, right? And this is the U.S. and legal liability is a pain in the butt, but it increases your chances of not getting the job simply because they can't consider you because now they know what you look like. And even if there's no bias at all, there's possibly the perception of bias and you could get sued. So just don't include pictures. It's a bad idea. And if you're submitting from sites that might have your picture attached to a profile or something, consider deleting it because it may be working against you. Sad, but unfortunately, it's kind of the way things are. So let's see. Let's talk about interviewing now. So you wrote a great cover letter. You found a good job. Wrote a great cover letter. This place you can work. They're like, sweet. Send me your resume. You look at the resume. You're like, wow, this person's really good at what we need. Cool. So now you're going to go talk to some people. So let's talk about typical hiring process. Again, this is kind of abstracted a little bit and kind of genericized, but this is pretty much how most tech companies are hiring these days, give or take a little bit. So the first thing we like to do is what I call a coffee chat. So basically, I've looked at your cover letter, I've looked at your resume, and I'm like, this person has potential. So we set up, it's about a 30-minute chat, and it's basically, it's almost like a speed date. It's a get to know the person. You know, I always like to start off with, let me tell you about Teltec. Let me tell you a little bit about what we do. Let me tell you about how we do it. Tell you about our culture, our values, what makes this a fun place to work for me, why I like it here, what would make you successful here. And then tell me about yourself. What are you looking for in your career? What have you been doing? You know, not detailed, but what have you been up to? Where do you want to go? What kind of things do you like to do in your spare time? You know, we don't get into things like family questions or anything like that because it's a slippery slope in some cases. But you know, what kind of hobbies do you have? You know, I like to go fishing. I like to race go-karts. You know, whatever. It's just, it gives us some insight into the type of mind the person has. You know, there are no real right answers. It's more just a question of we like to know stuff about people. We genuinely do. If that goes well, then we have a fairly deep dive technical interview. So, you know, people like Jason, people like Sean, get on the phone, typically also with the hiring manager, and go through technical questions. I'll talk a bit about the types of questions in a second. And again, not all the questions are super technical. There will be technical questions to make sure that you're not full of BS and you can actually do what you put on your resume. But you know, there will be other questions like, what technologies are you passionate about? How do you stay up to date on those technologies? Do you read books? Do you listen to blogs? Like sort of, you know, what is your thing? We are super passionate here at Teltec about engineering and development are our craft, right? It's a lifelong craft, it's lifelong learning. You're always evolving, you're always trying to get better, you're always trying to broaden your skill set and your horizon and do bigger and better things. And you know, you can't do that in a vacuum. If that goes well, then we have homework, basically coding challenge, technical project, or whatever. These are, I'll talk a bit more detail about this, but they're fairly limited in scope. Right? We don't want you to write an app for us and then take it from you and make money. We just want to see that you can take a small problem and see how you apply your thinking and your coding to it. You know, there are not right answers in most cases. And once you've turned in the assignment, assuming it was not completely terrible, we have kind of our final interview, which involves typically the technical people you've spoken to at the beginning. And we like to go through and just review the app. You know, why did you build it this way? Why did you make this choice? Why did you choose this framework over this framework? Those types of things. But, you know, get into kind of your design mentality and how you architect things and so on and so forth. It's also a great example or a great time to meet with some of the management of the company. Typically, at least the CEO or CTO likes to be on those calls. You know, maybe, you know, in the case of an engineering job, myself as the VP, or in product, our VP of product, but, you know, to just really kind of ask questions, get to know the person and feel if they're going to be a fit here and they're going to, you know, do well in our environment. Because, you know, as you can see by the fact that we're, you know, 25 slides in, we invest a lot of time and by extension money into the hiring process. And we want to make sure we get people that are going to be happy. We don't want to hire, just like our products, right? If you try one of our products and you don't like it, we give you a refund because we don't want to keep your money if you're not happy. And it's the same with working here. We want everybody here to be genuinely happy and to work well together here. So let's talk about questions, right? So many questions. We have some typical questions, and again, you know, these are just typical, but the first one always is, did you have a question?
Yeah. Related to the other slide. So one of the things I've kind of learned throughout the years, and let me know your thoughts on it, is they're interviewing you, but you're also interviewing them. You know, so, is it up there?
Yeah, yeah, so I'm gonna talk about that. So, you know, the first question we ask you is, why do you want to work here? And if you don't have a good question or good answer for that question, the rest of the interview is not gonna go well, and you're probably not gonna get past that point, right? A lot of people are applying for these jobs. You know, why do you want to be here? What is it about something here that made you say, I want to send a resume to Teltec that I'm going to put a lot of time and effort into? One question I ask is, why are there gaps in a person's employment history, right? Like if I see a person, you know, worked somewhere and then was like no job for 6 months, or you know, no job for a year or whatever, I am curious to know the answer to that. Again, it's not, a lot of people tend to perceive that as like a negative question, right? If you were somewhere and you got laid off, right? It happens. It's happened to me, I think it's happened to Sean, it happens, right? We're more interested in just why it happened and kind of what the story is behind it. You know, similarly for people that change companies a lot, right? Again, this is more and more common. You know, but if you're at a company 3 months and then another company 4 months, another company half a year, and then another company 3 months, short of being a consulting gig, that, you know, raises some alarms, and it's kind of like, okay, well, why is this person moving around all the time? Again, there may be a very good reason for that, but it's good to know. Yeah, I touched on this a bunch, but, you know, what are the things you're passionate about technology-wise? How do you stay current on those things beyond just doing developing them? You know, do you do development stuff in your spare time? You know, like we have a couple people here that are big into like automation and Raspberry Pis and stuff, and they just program that stuff at home because they're passionate about it. It's fun, and that's cool. Another one I like to ask, I don't know if you asked this or not, Sean. I know Nicola does. Nicola is, by the way, our mobile client director. What was the last book you read? And again, it doesn't have to be a tech book, it can be anything, but it's interesting to find out what people are into and kind of like what they're reading and doing. One that I know Sean does. Do you have a GitHub profile? And, you know, what does it show? What's your record of contributions? Do you stay up with, you know, do you contribute to open source libraries? Do you contribute to projects? Are you kind of doing stuff outside of the realm of your normal day-to-day job, you know, to, one, just contribute, or B, to keep your skills sharp or whatever? And again, this is more nice to have in a lot of cases because, you know, look, I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. I don't have time to get out contributions. I just don't. I'm trying to keep my house from burning down. So, you know, not necessarily a prerequisite, but it is nice to have. And last but not least, and to Jason's point, have your own questions. You are auditioning us as much as we are auditioning you. And if you ask us smart, insightful, thoughtful questions, that does nothing but raise your profile, because it shows you've done research on us. You know why you're looking at us. And there are things that, you know, we don't put on our website, you know, like, were we profitable last year or not? Who knows, right? We don't put that on teltec.co. But that might be a good question if you're coming to work here. Like, you guys look great. Your products seem to do well. Do you make money? Am I going to get paid? Right? Those are, you know, those are relevant questions. Those are good things to know. And they show that you're being considered and kind of thoughtful in your approach to the job. So at Teltec, when it comes to kind of making the ultimate hiring decision, we have sort of 3 rules. And we have these rules because we tend to be pretty protective of our culture. It's worked really well. You know, in the past year, so I started here about a year and a month ago, we were a little bit over 30 people, now we're at like 53. And for the most part, I think we've kept everybody we've hired. So we're doing a good job, and we want to keep it that way. So first is we hire smart people, right? We want people that are smart, not necessarily traditionally smart, right? We've had a couple people, we have a person that works for us now that used to manage Papa Murphy's. We had a developer here that we found in a Costco parking lot who now is kind of a big deal at Google. So it doesn't necessarily, you don't have to have a comp sci degree from CMU or Cal Poly or whatever, but you do have to be smart to work here. That's important. Secondly, our culture. What we do, how we do it, what our shared values are, kind of this is who we are. And we absolutely want people that fit our culture so that they can thrive here and we can thrive with them. And then last but not least, the no a-hole rule, right? You can be the smartest, best, most wonderful coder in the world. You could have been the architect of, you know, Android Nougat at Android, but if you're a jerk, you won't work here. End of story. We don't hire jerks. We don't hire people that can't play nicely in a team environment, and that's super huge. The homework I mentioned I would talk about this. Many slides ago, I mentioned M&M, right? You only get one shot. It's the same with these projects, right? Do not earn yourself the I phoned it in sticker, right? Don't phone it in. That's bad. I had an Android developer just a couple months ago who got all the way up to the project, did fantastically. Everybody loved him, thought he was great. He was in a similar industry to what we're in, so he had really relevant experience and looked like a slam dunk. And his project was crap. I mean, it was really bad. Didn't follow the instructions that we gave him. It looked like he threw it together in a couple of hours, didn't even do the things it was supposed to do, added extra features that we didn't ask for, and also didn't work, right? If you're gonna put in extra stuff, make sure it works. And got kind of terse when he was like, when we were like, you know, we're not going to proceed because your project wasn't good. Well, what do you mean it wasn't good? Oh, here's a list of things that you got wrong. It wasn't good. You know, the project that we ask you to do is not so much. I mean, it's partially this. It's not so much because we want to see if you can code and you can do this thing as you say you can do. We do. We want to see if you actually care. We want to see if you care enough about your work that you would do for us that you put 100% into it. Right? It's, you know, again, they're not onerous assignments. We're not asking you to like rewrite the world. They generally should take about 4 hours, right? A couple of nights. We generally give people as long as they'd like. I mean, not a month, but you know, you want a week to complete it. You want 2 weeks, cool. Like that's fine. Just make sure it doesn't suck. So many people blow this because they just don't put the work into it, and that's a shame, right? So if you are in a position where, and you know, this applies, we do this for product managers too, right? We'll say, do a tear down of a product and tell us how you make it differently. We tell people, look at our product portfolio and tell us what's right about it and what's wrong and how you might propose we reposition all our products for, you know, the next year, right? So we have a variety of these things we use, but ultimately we want to see a little bit about you, how you think and how you do things, but we really want to see if you put yourself into your work. But let's say you didn't phone it in and you did a great job. So that takes us to the offer. Another one of my biggest pet peeves. If you get an offer, be ready to accept it. You've gone through all this effort, you've identified the company, you've put all this work into it, and now we call you up and say, we'd like to send you an offer letter. We're going to offer you this position. And then people go, well, can I wait a couple weeks? Okay, sure. Why do you want to wait a couple of weeks? Here's another place not to answer correctly. Well, I also am expecting an offer from Mozilla, and actually that's kind of my first choice. So I want to see if they hire me first. Now I'm going to pull my offer back, and you're not going to get the offer. So because you're an idiot, number one, for telling me that. In this case, you probably should have lied. And you know, and then secondly, because you know you've wasted everyone's time, my time, my team's time, your own time. You wasted everybody's time getting to that point, and then you're not even sure like what you're going to take, right? And the answer is no. We're not going to wait 2 weeks, probably in most cases. And so, kind of the thing here is, don't apply for a job you don't want. Look, it may not be your first choice. It may not be your second choice. Maybe it's your third choice, but it needs to be one of your choices. If you're going to go through all this process and do projects and stuff like that, be prepared to accept the job. Look, I'm human too, and I've been in this situation, right? Maybe you have something else that, you know, is going to be a day away and maybe is a little bit more preferred or whatever. You know, we can always wait a couple of days. That's fine. It's perfectly valid, and you should say, I'd like a couple of days to think it over. I'd like to talk with my wife about it. I'd like to talk with my husband about it, right? Whatever it is, that's certainly fine. We don't expect you to accept immediately, but we're not going 2 weeks either. That also brings up the topic of counteroffers. Again, this is a situation I faced not long ago. Same thing, a guy who got all the way through the project, did a killer job on the project, came in through a recruiter, interestingly, who I probably won't work with again. And then was ready to make him an offer, and he said, "Oh, well, my current company told me they'd give me a little bit of a raise and let me work on the more fun stuff that I wanted to work on, so I think I'm just going to hang around, thanks, but no." You know, that just sucks. And when you get those types of counteroffers, the very first thing that you should think about is not, oh, should I take the counteroffer or should I take the other offer? The first thing you should think of is, how did I get into this position? Which logically should take you back to, why did I start looking for a new job in the first place? What were the things that really bothered me, right? It's almost never money. Maybe it's what you're working on, but in a lot of cases it's not that. It's you're not rewarded, you don't see a growth path, you don't have a mentor, you don't feel like you're improving every day. It's always stuff like that. And it's easy to seduce ourselves into thinking, oh, it's the money or it's this or that or the other thing, right? And you know, the reality is in most cases you probably really do hate it there. And the money or the slightly better assignment are not going to go away. I'm sure everybody's read this, but you know, statistically, about 80% of people who take the counteroffer end up leaving in another year. Like they don't last another year. And while you're there, you know, it has a lot of really negative effects. It kills your trust with your management. So they've kept you, but now they don't really trust you. And if you're really sick for 2 days, they're like, oh, is he sick or is he looking for another job again? It kills your future pay raises and promotions because, hey, we gave you a bunch of money to stay. We're not going to give you another promotion or pay raise anytime soon. It burns internal bridges. People in the company you work with now start seeing as you a traitor. You know, it's like, oh, you could work with, you know, you could work with Khaled, but he's just going to leave in 2 months anyway. Why do you want to bother with that? And it ruins your reputation not only internally but elsewhere, right? Because I'm never going to hire that person again. I can tell you that, or not try to hire that person. So counteroffers are generally very bad. Again, not a good idea to take them. And there are all sorts of reasons why. You can Google that and see all that. So you didn't take the counteroffer. You got the offer. Kind of the last thing is, of course, the money, right? Great quote from a guy who I follow on LinkedIn, who occasionally talks about hiring stuff, right? The first person to talk about the dollar amount is the loser, right? So Cash Rules Everything Around Me, one of the best albums ever, 36 Chambers, Wu-Tang Clan. The guy that you read about on the airplane, Chester Carras, who tells us, in life you don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. Very true. And if you put together your desire for money with some smart negotiating savvy, you get the major bag filled with money. And maybe DJ Khaled comes to your house and says, "Be the best." It's kind of trite, but it's true. The longer you keep your money numbers to yourself, the more money you will get in the end. You know, I'm arguing against myself here because ultimately I'm the one that has to approve the budget and how much I'm going to pay somebody. But, you know, really, do your homework. There are lots of great sites out there that can tell you with your experience and skills roughly what you should get paid. You know, not only with respect to skills and stuff, but also region and that sort of thing. And you know what you've done and what you're going to bring to the table. And if you get to this point and you've passed all those other things, unless you're asking for an insanely ludicrous amount of money, you will probably get close to what you want. You may have to start high and work your way down or whatever, but you know, ultimately, don't be afraid to ask for what you think you're worth for a number of reasons. One of the biggest ones is if you sell yourself short, you're going to be there, and in 3 months, you're going to be like, man, I didn't have the money. I should ask for more. Like, don't put yourself in that situation. Don't do that. Like, get what you're worth. Like, really. At the end of the day, you know, it's generally a difference of like, you know, that $5,000 or $10,000. You know, ultimately, if you're that great, I'll probably find a way to get you the money that you want. Pretty straightforward. So that's my spiel. Happy to answer any questions.
So one thing I heard about the negotiation part is you never reveal what you're currently getting paid. So if someone asks, you can say something like, that's, you know, company privilege information, I write it down before that, or, you know, because like you said before, the person that starts, the more information you give, then the other person on the other end knows where to start from.
Yeah,
So
that's
rather, you shouldn't say, I get paid, you know, 10,000 a year, or whatever, you know, whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely true. You know, you know, there are, again, you can Google this, there are loads of ways to deflect that question that are, you know, sort of fair and proper. Worst case, you might get in a situation where, you can talk about a range. I'm looking to make, so you're a senior Iowa State. I'm looking to make between 100 and 130, right? You give a nice big broad range that gives you lots of latitude, and maybe you only make 90, but so what, right? You're giving enough wiggle room in. And look, that's also, in some cases, that cannot be a bad idea. So, a personal story. I was interviewing for positions probably about 6 years ago as a VP of product, and the list of skills that they wanted was pretty extensive, and it was very commensurate with what a VP of product would do. But they were paying like $30K below market rate. And, it was like, look, I would love to work for you guys, but this will be a waste of both of our time because I can't work for that little money. This is what I need as a minimum. And if you can't even offer that as a minimum, then it's not worth the conversation. And they understood that, and that was nice. And then, we went our separate ways. And even like a year and a half ago, there was a recruiter that called me. Who was it for? They were looking for they were looking for a VP of product for Zulily in Seattle. And Zulily's a growing company. They're making a bunch of money, and they have this very long list of requirements, experience, and stuff. And they were looking to pay basically a junior product manager salary. And it was a recruiter, so I had a pretty frank conversation with them. And I basically said, you are not going to find anybody for this. Like, you're going to find somebody grossly underqualified that completely screws it up, or you're going to find somebody that just takes it so they can work for Zulily and leaves in a year because they can't afford it to eat. So, the more that you can do to, get that negotiation to move away, to postpone it, and then ultimately to stir it in your favor, then absolutely you should do it.
If you are a teacher who's going to advise students or someone who just graduated college or boot camp, and you're really not qualified for most of the kind of jobs we've been talking about, do you have any advice for how they might get a foot in the industry other than get a job in tech support and work your way up?
Yeah. So one really good way to do that would be to come to a meetup like this, listen to my spiel, and then afterwards talk to some of the people that work here and tell exactly that story. I used to do this, or I'm just out of college and I'm working on this, and I would like to have a job with a company like yours, or maybe not even like yours, right? Maybe I'd like to have a job. I'd love to build apps in the healthcare field, working on embedded sensors and telemetry to help cure diabetes, right? Great. You have to start somewhere, and at an event like this or whatever, or something similar, it comes back to networking. You're going to meet people that can give you advice and maybe steer you with other people and put you in the right kind of paths that you can, help to get to that ultimate end state.
Yeah, we don't know many people, but if you meet people like us who do know many people, maybe you
that's exactly it. And especially, I'm a dinosaur. I've been doing this for so long. I know probably somebody that does something in about every industry. Most of whom are doing pretty well. So, and I'm sure you're the same. I'm sure Jason, you're the same. It never hurts to talk to people and to just ask questions and have conversations. At the end of the day.
I was really surprised when you said the part about having another offer, or admitting that you're kind of in the process with another company, and that I always thought that was actually a positive rather than a negative. And maybe I got that all wrong, but I've been in the process where they'll ask, by the way, do you have any offers right now, or do you think you might be getting some? And I always thought that was kind of a probe to see how valuable I was, how in demand I was. Maybe another company, if I have an offer, it means another company also did due diligence with me and I'm valuable. But you're saying that, in your opinion, that kind of scares you away a little bit.
I wouldn't say it scares me away. So a couple of things. So first of all, if you're talking to somebody who's pretty qualified for the position and they're looking for a job, you can almost assume that they have other things going on. And it is a good idea, and in fact, I think HR does this mostly, but it is also a good idea at the beginning to ask that question, because if that person is at step 3 with company A and you're company B and you're starting at step 1, you want to know do I really stand a chance, right? Like, you know, if we get, and you also want to know if you need to speed things up, right? Because, the hiring process, right? We could get through the first 3 steps, and then like the CTO is on vacation and he's going to be out for a week, and it's like, well, can we wait a week, or do we need to pull this in? Those types of things. So all those things are good at kind of a pragmatic level. And what I think I'm saying is, it's more that, so it's okay to know that you might be working with somebody, and even that you have another offer. What we don't want to do is we don't want to sit around for 3 weeks waiting until you get the other offer. That's more of my point. It's like, you think you might be getting another offer from someplace. Well, okay, that's good, and especially if you like literally tell us, I want to work there more than I want to work here. Yeah. Like that's kind of like,
it's just bad tactics.
Yeah, it's just bad tactics. I mean, there are plenty of ways to get around that situation without coming out and saying, well, if the cheerleader doesn't want to go to the prom with me, then I guess I don't know, pick some other bad stereotype. Flute player in the marching band. I guess I'll take you, right? It's that's not a good way to start off.
Okay. Another question I had was the cover letter. Where do you like to see interest about Teltec? Do you want to see it in the first paragraph, or could it be like more further down? Like, when do you give up?
Not until you get to the end, right?
Okay,
so it's a page.
Yeah.
Right? They're not longer than that, and I think it's more just about the story you're telling, right? It might be in the first paragraph, it might be in the third paragraph, but if that story is there and it ultimately ticks all the boxes of the things I want to know about you and gets me to that endpoint, it kind of doesn't matter where it goes. It could be, the first paragraph, it could be in the third, it could be in the middle, and sort of just, wherever you sort of get the point across relevant to your interests and experience and kind of your, career continuum.
So you'll read mostly the whole cover letter, and if it doesn't talk about your company, then you're like, well, this isn't.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Or there are certain tells too, right? Like if I'm looking at the very first paragraph that says, I am interested, if it doesn't even mention Teltec, I am interested in a position coding iOS apps, and I think I am a great iOS app developer because I've done some iOS apps. At that point, I'm already starting to be like, okay, like where are we going with this? And so yeah, I mean, it should have a little bit of a hook at the beginning. But again, it's pretty easy to quickly look through them and be like, this is a no, and this is okay, this is maybe a maybe, and then go from there.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so I've seen resumes where I guess recruiters plaster their logo onto it, and it completely ruins the formatting of some resumes.
Yes.
Like, how do you guard against that if you're, a candidate?
I don't know that you can, which is unfortunate. I will say that myself, I tend to give those more latitude, right? Because I realize that in a lot of cases, the person has provided that to the recruiter, and then the recruiter has just butchered it. And I don't want to punish them because the recruiter's an idiot, right? A lot of recruiters, I won't name names, you know what I'm talking about, Sean. Will like rip your resume off of LinkedIn and then put their logo and stuff all over it, and borderline it becomes unreadable. One way to get around that is during the 30-minute coffee chat, the first step, say, hey, the resume I got from the recruiter is really messed up. Could you do me a favor and just send me your version of the resume so I have something cleaner to look at? And the recruiter's not on the phone, so they don't know, and you can get them to send it to you directly, which, some recruiters get worried when you talk directly to the candidate, but, ultimately it's like, look, just send me a decent version of resume so I know what you kind of are really about versus this alphabet soup nonsense that the recruiter's having.
How much weight do you put on just to come with in-person interview, but if it's more of a relaxed setting? Do you still expect people to be in a suit and tie, or does it out?
No, not at all. And that's a really good question. I should have put that in here because it's one of those areas that kind of hangs people up, I think, to some degree. So I wouldn't love, if somebody rolled in for a developer candidate job with like torn up cargo pants, flip-flops, and like a t-shirt where like it was like 3 sizes too big and hadn't been washed for a month, I might be a little concerned. I'd still probably talk to them though, because that's just it's kind of
Software.
yeah, it's right, it's dev, it's software engineering, it's just kind of the way things are. You know, so what I would suggest is go to the company's website, look at the pictures they have of like the work environment. I mean, like for Teltech, we have a video that takes you through the whole building, and you can see some of the people that work here. It's really easy to get a feel for roughly what that looks like, and then, you know, sort of plan appropriately, right? You know, it's always nice to see somebody who dresses up a little bit. If somebody showed up in a suit, you know, getting back to this thing about ageism, people are probably gonna go, oh man, this dude's like 60 years old. Just like, I don't know, right? So, you know, but then of course, if you're 60 years old and you walk in dressed like you're 20, that's a problem too. You just have to kind of use your you know, use your common sense and just look at, you know, kind of what does it look like there, and how can I present myself in a way that's consistent with how I feel about myself, but also, you know, sort of fits in with what I'm seeing there. Because, you know, I mean, look, if somebody, Sean started coming to work every day in a suit, you know, great. Nobody else is going to be in a suit, but if he feels good about himself and that's how he wants to come to work, that's, you know, that's fantastic. We're certainly not going to throw a fit about that. And, you know, if you want to wear, you know, hoodies and t-shirts every day, which is normally what I wear, by the way. So I have dressed up slightly for this presentation because it's a presentation. So, you know, you just have to kind of figure out the context and, you know, plan accordingly. It's, you know, not too hard to do.
I have a question. I'm a teacher, so I teach computer science and advice. So I'm constantly, like, you know, kind of pushing my students, oh, you should look in there, look there. So you mentioned 3 things that you're looking for. You said smart, you're going to fit the culture, and not a jerk, right? So would you feel like all those are equal? Is one
well,
the other?
I think probably the last one is the most important. And, you know, not being a butthead really is part of fitting the culture, right? They're sort of 2 halves of the same whole. But there is nothing you're going to do here, or really any tech company, that doesn't involve working with a lot of other people. And so being able to work with different personalities, manage those against your own personality is absolutely super important. You know, you can see this. You see this a lot of times, even with you know, even with like you know, sports teams, right? You have one superstar, but maybe like, so the Seahawks. I live in Seattle. The Seahawks had Percy Harvin, who was a fantastic player, but he was poisoned in the locker room. Everybody hated him. He talked badly about other people. He talked badly about the coaches, and he was just bringing the morale of the team down. So even as good as he was, he got fired. He got shipped somewhere else. And amazingly, the team started doing better. So it's that sort of thing. Like, you can be super duper smart, and you can even kind of fit the values, but if you're a jerk and you don't play nice with other people, then you're not going to last very long here at all. Because we can't do what we do if everybody doesn't sing from the same songbook.
And, you know, one thing that I kind of, maybe I'm wrong, in terms of the student, is that you have to be able to, it's not as much as what you know, because nobody really knows, and you know, it's tech, it's different every day. So it's about being able to figure it out.
Yes, very true. And, you know, again, which brings it back to our values. Maybe I need a Kendrick slide. Be humble, right? Understand what you just said. You don't know everything, right? But other people around you might, and if we can all play together, we all make each other smarter. And being able to admit when I don't know, and then go find the answer, or find somebody who knows how to find the answer, or whatever it is. That's big. And, you know, even failure, like we like to say here that we celebrate failure, and we do, right? If we fail, we've learned something. And we don't do it again, right? If you fail twice in the same manner, that's a problem. But, you know, we had over Easter weekend, we had a fairly big problem here with one of our services where some stuff fell over and it didn't go well. And then next week we got together and we got all the people in the room that were involved, and we do a fairly straightforward retrospective. What worked? And there wasn't much that worked. Some things that worked. What went wrong? And then what would you do differently next time? And then we take that stuff, we synthesize it, and we put it into, kind of here's how this happened, here's what went wrong, here's what went right, and here's what we're going to do so this doesn't happen again. We're going to do these 9 things, and those actions get handed out to people that are responsible for them, and they need to make sure that they do them, but they do, and then that thing never happens again. And it's exactly that point. It's you're going to fail, you're not going to know everything. But if you're open to that and you're not arrogant and you are willing to let other people help you be smarter and admit when you've made a mistake, you'll do well. And to be fair, you need a culture that supports that too. We have that here. Other places don't, unfortunately. And that's part of what you want to ask when you're asking the company. If I screw something up my second week, what happens to me? They should have a good answer for that. The person you're talking to should be able to explain to you how they've worked you through that situation. Anyone else? Okay.
In the interview process, I've read that you should have certain stories prepared that better position you, some how did you overcome a challenge or adversity? Do you have any tips on what kind of stories you should have?
Wow. I don't really, and the reason why is that I hate those questions because of exactly what you're telling me. Because people expect those questions and they come in with a rehearsed answer. Okay. And ultimately that doesn't tell me anything about you. So I don't ask those questions. I don't. That's another meme I should have put in here. I have to think about how it goes. What would you say is one of your worst qualities, which is a question I hate. What would you say is one of your worst qualities? Well, I think one of my worst qualities is I always tell the truth. Really? That's interesting. I would think that that's actually a positive. Yeah, well, that's because you're stupid, right? I mean, that right there sums up what's wrong with that question, because it forces you to give some sort of a canned answer that doesn't really reflect who you are or anything about you. And to me, it's valueless. So I don't even bother with those sorts of questions. Some of the other types of questions I do focus on are contextual and related to some extent to the learning question, right? Tell me about a time you were working on a project and you came up against a problem you initially couldn't solve. How did you approach it? What did you do? Did you talk to somebody? Did you get Stack Overflow, which is what we all do? What those types of things are important to me because it shows me kind of how you tackle a challenge. It shows me if you're willing to admit that you had a problem or you had a challenge. You can learn a lot just by listening to that answer. And there's no right or wrong answer. And the nice thing is that typically that type of question leads you down a lot of other paths where you can learn a lot more about the person in a very short amount of time versus some reverse thing. And that's not to say people won't ask you these questions, because there are still plenty of people that will ask you these questions. I got that question asked once in an interview, again, about 6 years ago when I was looking for my previous gig, and I got up and walked out of the interview. That's how strongly I believe that that's a stupid question. Yeah, that told me I don't want to work here. If that's a question that is valuable to you, then I want to. Yes?
One comment about the idea of how important is the value of not being a jerk and everything. I once heard somebody say, I can always teach you something on the technical level of if you don't understand a certain technology we use, we can always teach you, but we can't teach you how to be a better person.
It's true. It's very true. Yeah.
But on a previous topic of the cover letters, in particular, if you're planning to work for a very large company, like something in the Fortune 500 level, where they have so many individuals, I mean, how likely is it that they're going to look at the cover letter in the first place if you attach it? Because they'll have I've heard people saying that they've gotten 100 responses just for one position. Mm-hmm. How likely is it that they're going to even consider it at that point, where they're just trying to filter out from all of those applications?
Yeah, so that's another very good question. I can give you a pretty concrete example. I worked at Nokia for about 10 years, And I worked with other product managers in a product group at the time, and I was the head of product for the OV product, which was kind of our cost services thing. It's now dead because we screwed it up, but anyway. But I for some of the positions I got, I had to build a team of 6 product managers fairly quickly. So I got hundreds of resumes, and I would go through and I would look at least the cover letter for every single one, and I would either move on or reject because I actually care about it, right? Because somebody has taken the time to put something together to send it to me. The least, and I still do this here. If I'm not interested, I can't tell them exactly why I'm not interested, but the least I can do is put them out of their misery by moving their resume to the "we're not interested" pile and sending a nice note, as to sorry, but not quite right. But in a big corporation, there are other managers that are not going to go nearly that close. They're going to go through like 10 a day or 1 a day or whatever, and they're not going to respond to anybody. They're not going to file them. They're not going to do anything. And so, unfortunately, you're basically rolling the dice, which is why it's, even with a big company, it's really nice to have someone you've networked with that gets your resume past that stage, because that's the biggest problem. If you're going in cold, the chances of somebody calling you back, if you don't know at least a little bit about what's going on the other side of the big wall, they're very, very slim. I mean, it almost, I don't want to say never say never, but it's almost not worth even submitting, because it's 99% likely that you're never going to from.
That leads me to a question. I've heard a technique, if you don't know anyone who works at a company, cold email them. As a hiring manager, is that good or bad to get a cold email?
I've never actually seen it happen.
Oh, yes.
No, not personally. I don't think it would be a horrible technique. Like if
It's like I applied, just want to let you know about myself. It's sort of like a cover letter, but it comes directly into your inbox.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if nothing else, it shows me you're interested enough in the job to try and find out who I am and find out my email and then send me a letter. And if the email is well written, I probably more often than not would go, okay, well, let me go see what this person is about. Like, this is interesting. I would say that's probably not a bad idea. Like, probably work better at a smaller company like this than a bigger company, but yeah, I could see how that would not be a bad idea.
You mentioned job sites and recruiters. What about a job fair?
Job fairs. I haven't been to one in so long. I don't know, have a valid opinion about them. I mean, way back when I was sort of getting started, I went to a couple of them here and there. I don't know that I've ever found any of them super useful. But for for entry level, for like positions for kids that you're teaching and stuff, they're still probably fairly valid, because you get to speak to a lot of people quickly. And one positive is that you get to actually speak to the people. So you get to, shake hands with the other person in the eye and, make a little bit of a connection. And if nothing else, again, as you're starting, maybe the person you're speaking to doesn't have something for you right now, but if you can make that connection and kind of stay in touch and, ping them every 3 months or 6 months or whatever and say, hey, I met you at the career fair. I still think your company is great. In the past 6 months, I've done X, Y, and Z, and I'm learned this and learned that. I'm really excited to do this other thing. Just checking in to see if you have anything. I don't think anybody is going to be unhappy to receive that kind of email and to kind of help along. At least I know I would be. Anybody else?
Thanks.
Cool. Thank you very much. There's still pizza left if anybody wants more to eat.